Hey guys, welcome to Edu Kingdom College. Today we'll be going through a selective high school trial test, specifically focusing on Power Rating Test 13. So firstly, I'd like you guys to note that questions 1 to 4 is referring to a comic, which is unlike the extracts we've been looking at recently. So we're just going to take a look at the main idea. So the title, let's take a look, is called Throwaway World, right? Considering that this is the title, we're gonna take a look at how it's called world, right? World relating to perhaps sustainability or that particular issue. This is an important idea. Also, just to know what the general theme of the extract or the text is incredibly important when trying to dissect it. Actually, the first question is asking us about the main theme or the main issue. So this is the first page of a comic story. The story will most likely concentrate on issues of. So we know it's about, the environment because of the world. So it will most likely talk about recycling. Okay. It cannot be about growing up, because the reason why the family is arguing, or at least Hung, the main character, or presumably the main character, is they're actually talking about recycling, right? And so growing up would not just show one argument about a simple or modern issue like recycling, but rather it would focus on many different issues, and we haven't really been exposed to that. There's also nothing that suggests personal hygiene. Hygiene could be one of them, but personal, we're talking about showers, brushing your teeth, etc. That's not really been mentioned. And family disputes, once again, it goes back to the fact that this is about recycling, okay? Yeah, so now let's move on to question 2. The sentence in the frame, "Don't worry, Hung, it's only one bag," is intended to show. Now let's take a look at that part of the extract. So right here, "Don't worry, Hung, it's one bag." So the reason why this character is responding to it is because of this part. "Ma, please don't throw that bag in the bin. We could use it again. Help the environment." Okay, the help the environment part is the most important thing there. Okay, so here we're just talking about how everybody has this mentality that if you just throw away one bag, like it's just one item, right? But if everybody had that mentality, then this one bag could accumulate to 20,000, right? And then eventually it becomes pollution, right? Thus, it would be D, that if everyone threw away one bag, then lots of bags would get thrown away, okay? Right, so C is actually, they're trying to argue against that plastic bags are not a real threat. That's not true. They're actually arguing against that, okay? That at least they are responding to that, right? How most people don't care about the environment, that is far too general. We're talking specifically about bags, right? And A, that many people argue about plastic bags. The main thing they're actually arguing about is recycling, right? And how people don't really care for the environment. So that's why it cannot be A. Now let's look at 3. From the comic strip information, the person who is most informed is, well, we can actually take a look at who is arguing it. So we're looking at this character, right? This character is talking to this one who is their mother. So that's Ma. We can assume this is Hung, right? And so this character is saying, oh, not many people check the bag or two, who cares? So they're saying like, oh, it's not really big of a deal. That could perhaps be a sibling or something like that. The father over here, we can assume it's like a father or some sort of father figure, right? Is actually trying to say like, oh, maybe, right, just some fertilizer for our pot plants, right? But that's not actually that's not particularly a stance where it's incredibly helpful. Thus it would be Hung. To answer question 4, for Hung, compost is better than fertilizer because A is not smelly, B is not brought into the house, C does not require trips, or D provides a way of recycling scraps. We can take that answer from the last the last box, the last panel, right? So they're talking about just some fertilizer for our pot plants, and oh sorry dad, but if we use our food scraps to make compost, it would be cheaper than buying that stuff, right? And compost from food scraps, dirty and smelly, right? So let's take a look at this speech bubble, right? They're trying to convince us that it's cheaper, and because, you know, they're eating, and it would just be more convenient because they've eaten it and it's just the scrappy part of it, right? So that part helps recycle and provide an alternative for fertilizer because it's cheaper, and then that way they don't feel like they're wasting, right? So the answer would be D, right? So for questions 5 to 8, we'll be analyzing a poem called Andy's Return, right? So this poem is about a character called Andy visiting or coming back to his uncle or his relative at their hometown, right? So if we take a look at question 5, it is evident that A, uncle was disappointed with the amount of money Andy had brought back. This is not true, because if we actually take a look at the second stanza, with big checks in his pockets, Andy had actually come home with a good amount of money. So it's not true that uncle was disappointed. It actually sounds as if uncle is a bit impressed, right? Now take a look at B. Andy was looking extremely well after his long trip, right? So let's take a look around the second half and the first half of the first and second stanza around here. His face burnt brown with the weather, right? Burnt brown with the weather. He has unkept hair that's faded, sleeping in the wet, and looking old and jaded. It actually sounds as if Andy is exhausted, that this weather and this trip has really tired him, right? So that's not true. If he's looking extremely well, he's very tired. Now D, none of the above. Before we take a look at that, let's just take a look at C. Andy was the same happy person he was before he left. Now this is this is the answer, because if we actually take a look at this line, but he is hearty yet. So despite all of the hardships or the exhaustion that he has faced, trying to get back to his home, he is still hearty, okay? He's still here, merry as of yore. He's still very happy, right? So Andy was actually the same happy person, right? And D is not the answer because C is possible. Now if we take a look at C, Old Blotcher was probably A, uncle's name, B, the neighboring farmer, C, Andy's horse, and D, Andy's dog. So firstly, the uncle's name is not actually mentioned, it's just old uncle, right? B, neighboring farmer. There's actually nothing in there that really tries to mention that, nor does it really imply that there is some sort of neighboring farmer here. Yes, so let's cross that out. Andy's horse has not actually been mentioned either, right? But it's D, right? Because if we look at the Old Blotcher part, it says barks, right? What animal barks? A dog, right? Thus D, right? Let's take a look at 7. Why would the family have been relieved, right? So A, Andy had brought all his gear back with him. B, uncle was bright and cheerful again. C, auntie wasn't cheerful anymore. And D, Andy had not spent his wages. So firstly, we can take away some of these answers like B and C, right? Because we're looking for a reason, like why are they relieved? But here, uncle and auntie, they're just saying, oh, well, they were already relieved. Okay, they're basically rephrasing the question, not answering it, right? A, Andy had brought all his gear back with him, right? Yes, that is true. He had brought his gear back, like the billy clothes, saddle leather, rein, right? However, they were not in good condition, right? They weren't in good condition. So that would not be a good reason for why they were relieved. If anything, that would be a bit disappointing, or they would be a bit confused. Maybe why did Andy come back home with damaged materials? But D it's a good answer, because over here, back to with big checks in his pockets, especially with the parts that's be but merry as of yore, right? Merry is the keyword, happy, right? Are Andy's home once more, okay? So they're actually very happy that he's successful, that he's made it, that he's, got a job, he's made some money, right? So, especially because he has moved away, right? Now, if we look at 8, which statement accurately describes what the poet is conveying, right? A, the heat and dryness or the weather. B, there's always money around the outback. C, Andy is a funny sort of character. And D, there's so much fun and happiness in Andy's family, right? So let's just first go through B, C, and D, right? There's money around the outback. This completely contradicts what the poem is saying, right? Andy had gone out of the outback and he had been successful. So that's considering that is one of the major themes of the poem, moving out and working or adulthood, etc., right? That is not something that's feasible here, right? That may be true as a general fact, but in this poem, at least in this context, that is not true. See, Andy is a funny sort of a character, right? We're not really getting the impression that Andy is very funny, or at least well, although we may get that impression, we're not actually given that is the main idea. That's because, well, it is not, right? We're also talking about other things. We're talking about how their uncle has missed him, and yeah, we're also getting the impression that Andy is quite serious at times, considering how he has moved away and how he took his career or his pathway very seriously. If you look at D, there's so much fun and happiness in Andy's family, right? This could have been true if this poem was only this extract, right? But that's not the main focus, because we have to take a look at these, right? If we look at the first stanza, right, we're describing the outback. We're saying how it's hot, right, and how the traveling was not good. Now we're looking at the second stanza. We're looking at how he's very sweaty. He looks old. It's like very it's just not a very good place for him, right? Because of how exhausted he is. But in the last stanza, they're showing some sort of relief, right? At least Andy is home, right? At least Andy is here, and like even though the trip or the weather was horrible, at least he's here. So that is why it is not D, and the answer is A instead. We only have 2 more questions to complete, so let's take a look at questions 9 and 10. Right, so question 9, the superstition about unplayed violins, right? Let's just take a look at the extract and let's look at keywords, okay? So common sense in the belief for violin, particularly a good one, okay? Now it says later on it will deteriorate and lose its tone if not regularly played, right? So this superstition is not actually something that is based on some sort of belief, or she said this and he said this and they said this. It's not based on a rumor per se. It's actually based on the conditions of a violin, right? So it's not that this is incorrect, right? It's actually true. Is a particularly good one is not related. We're not asking for an opinion or whether or not it's good or bad. We're asking like what about it, right? Now C, it was invented by musicians. That's not true. Musicians actually are not really mentioned in this particular superstition. Now it's D, based on common sense. By common sense, they just we can take a look at how it's based on actual information, okay? True information, right? Because it will deteriorate and lose its tone if not regularly played, right? Question 10, the tune I dreamt I dwelt in marble halls can bring bad luck if A, not played correctly, B, there has been a break in the rehearsal, C, has been played any time in the Bohemian Girl, or D, played in the light opera in which it was written, right? So let's take a look. Several particular tunes are also ill-omened, and many musicians and singers believe that bad luck will strike them If they play or even whistle the tune, I dreamt well in marble halls, right? So let's take a look at our options. Played at any time except in the Bohemian Girl, okay? That is quite literally what they are stating, right? Right here, okay? So the light opera for which it was written, basically. So that is why they believe it could bring bad luck, because it's literally stated in the extract. None of these options are actually supported by the text. So please remember and take note that we need to be drawing our answers from. So thank you for completing this quiz with me. Just to wrap up test 13, I would like you guys to remember that considering that this is a comprehension aspect of your test, your answers need to be based on the extract, okay? I know that maybe you might have some background information and some background knowledge, and whilst that can be useful, particularly if you're looking for the definition, you need to make sure that it fits well with the context, right? There needs to be a clear link between your answer and the text that you are being given. Otherwise, the answer is incorrect. Also, please pay attention to the main ideas. What are they specifically talking about in the entire text? But also, what are they talking about in stanza 1, 2, and 3? Okay, this will heavily influence your final answer, so please pay attention to that. So that's it for today. I'll see you guys next week. Please take care, and yeah.